In a way, one doesn't want to interfere with all of this. So, can we talk and listen and look at the same time? With an openness which knows no resistance or borderlines. Recently, someone came to talk with me and said, there were so many questions I was going to bring up, but right now, being right here in this room, there's really only the question, what is it to be aware? Can you and I talk about or look into what it means to be aware? Is that a question for all of us? Realizing to one degree or another how unaware we live most of the time. Deeply unaware of what moves us deeply, what compels us, propels us, withdraws us, scares us, fulfills us, fills us with desire, craving, and wanting. How we talk with each other, listen, the basis of our words, where they come from. Deep assumptions that we make, prejudices that pervade us, how unaware we are of all of that. So, what does it mean to be aware? Not just superficially, in and out, hearing something and then going with a fantasy that is triggered, but profoundly aware of ourselves and each other in relationship with each other, with the things around us, the wind, the thunder, the rain and trees, the swishing grasses, the puddles, the animals. And what deeply moves us or upsets us or attracts us, repels us from moment to moment. Is it possible to be aware of all of that? Or are we to continue living so automatically, so habitually, so defensively, protectively, narrowly, always in one way or another wrapped up in ourselves. It's not so difficult to listen to the thunder and rain, is it? Just let it crash and pour and light up and swoosh. Is it possible to just to be there without being there, with any judgment, any reaching out or grasping, without any resistance, fear? Or if there is resistance and fear and grasping, can that be seen and noticed with the same awareness that listens to the thunder and the wind and the trees? Is it possible to sit and listen openly without any sense of me here listening? No thought about myself? And as a thought about myself, listening or not listening, attending or difficulty in attending, as these thoughts come up, can they be seen as thoughts as they come up? Or is there immediately the feeling and conviction that this is me? Me thinking, me hearing, me wanting or grasping or resisting? Or can one detect, as one listens to the sound of the thunder and the drops of rain? Can one listen to a thought saying, this is me, I am listening, I can't listen? The thought, the image about oneself, can that be seen as lightning? How can one be aware? What does it mean to be aware as we're talking with each other? Where do the words come from? Somebody asked me that yesterday. I'm really wondering, as I'm talking with you or someone else, where do these words come from? Where do they come from? Can one wonder about this and listen? From what we know, from what we want to be, from how we want to impress, how we want to sound. Words are formed from this complex conglomerate of images and thoughts about oneself, all laid down in memory from past experiences. Come these thoughts about how one wants to sound, what one wants to say, how one wants to be seen or heard. can one be in touch with this habitual outpouring of words? Not really, most of the time, not really seeing what one is saying. It comes so smoothly, so automatically, or so hesitantly, but not because one is looking at what one is saying, but because of habits and images about oneself. How good one is in convincing or in putting forth an opinion. Or how poor in comparison with others who seem to be so much more intelligent, knowledgeable. You see, when we talk with each other and listen to each other, it can be just like a mirrored room. Once in a museum in Buffalo, there was an exhibit of a mirrored room. We stepped into it, and everything was mirror. The floor was mirror, the sides were mirror, and the ceiling was mirror. There was also a table and chair in there which one wasn't to sit on. It was also mirror. Everything reflected everything. And was that oneself which came back from all sides, top, bottom? Or just the reflections of oneself, the images? Without carrying this analogy too far, in talking with each other, can that be like a mirror of oneself? Discovering one's reactions, these instantaneous responses, feelings of hurt or feeling well, feeling flattered. And the attachment to what one puts forth, what one says. It may be an opinion, but one has said it, and therefore it's me, now I have to defend it. I can't take it back, because this would be giving in or losing the assumptions that one has to win or not give in, or else the other one will take advantage of one or be the winner. There's no end to watching how we relate with each other. In listening, like listening to thunder and rain and lightning, and a running stream that is filling up with water. Listening not with judgment, then we can't listen. And we're caught up in what we think we should be. We're caught up in shame or guilt or anger. Just listening. How we talk and respond and react, and listening to the other person at the same time. Seeing how hard it is to listen to someone else, because we already know something about him or her. We have ideas about him. And these ideas filter the perception, distort it. We have general and particular assumptions about someone else. The general are more like what a person is because she's a woman or he's a man. He or she are professionals or workers or unemployed or don't know what to do right now. have no job, immediately an image of this person. And therefore, not this complete openness of meeting each other, finding out freshly. One has known a person for a long time, and there is knowledge about this person, which if it is not detected, if one doesn't see it, hear it, feel it, like thunder and lightning, it will filter out what this person actually is this moment. It will screen it, throw a shadow over it, distort it. That's inevitable. So how is one going to be aware? We're forever looking for a method or a practice to bring this kind of awareness about. But awareness has nothing to do with a practice. It has nothing to do with a goal or any method or motive. It sheds light on goal, method, and motive. It illuminates what goes on in the body, mind, and brain as we want awareness. And in listening to this churning of wanting something and really coming upon it by quietly attending, there's awareness and not wanting it. How it happens, no one knows. That it does happen is a fact for all of us to find out. Last night, driving home from visiting some people, it occurred to me that we rarely wonder what is the method of being inattentive. What is the method to be unaware? We just are inattentive. It just happens. We're not following a procedure. It's just inattention. And we don't question that. But we want to know how to be attentive. Why? Do we remember how easy and smoothly and flowing things were when we were attentive? And now engaged with that memory and wanting that back. That's not attention, is it? It is memory, thought, and wanting. What thought and memory project. Can one see that? Can one be aware of the switching back and forth between memory, wanting, imagining, projecting, fearing, and just listening to the bird? And in the openness of listening, aware of a memory that was? Can one be clear about the difference between listening and thinking? Listen. the idea of a bird sitting on a wet branch with drops dripping from that branch and from the leaves, the glistening of the leaf, that's right now, that's imagination, that's thinking. But the sounds and feelings of cool air, smells that come through the doors, physical feeling of sitting, hands on the knees, perspiration, the actuality of that is not thinking, that's there, it's what is. The word pain, the word bird or thunder is thought. And what is heard right now is not thought, is it? Listen. If the word comes up, thunder rolling, thunderstorm, more rain, we need it, can one see that's thought? And can one notice how at the instant of thought and the associations, we've had so little rain, it's good for the garden, it's a different activity, it's a different field in the brain. It's narrow and no longer the openness of indiscriminate, choiceless listening. It's like stepping from an open hill where there's a vast view of the sky and the distant hills, the woods nearby and the grass and gravel underfoot, stepping into a house with the doors closed and the windows shaded. We're not saying with that it's bad to think, but to see for oneself that it is an altogether different action, thinking and listening or attending. To be intimate with what is what. And to also discover how, as soon as a thought, I like this or I don't like it, it's bad or it's good, as soon as thoughts like that arise, I want it or I don't want it, then it's impossible to listen openly, choicelessly, accurately. Because the grasping or the rejecting distorts the perception. One doesn't like the looks of a person, the sound of his voice or her mannerisms. One cannot really openly perceive that person. And is one perceiving one's reactions, one's emotions, memories that are triggered. Sometimes people say, what you're talking about or writing about seems to be altogether psychological. What about spiritual questions? Religious questions? Somebody brought it up yesterday that a guest coming to the house was asking him, are you engaged in a spiritual life here? What do we mean by these words? Can we find out for ourselves and together What do we mean by spiritual or religious life? Do these words refer to ideas we have about what spiritual life is, religious life is, ideas based on what we have heard and read, been told for long, long times? Can one look? Idea of spiritual life is to maybe find God, be in union with God. Or get to be enlightened, be on a path to enlightenment, perform practices to get to that state of enlightenment or nirvana or deliverance, liberation. But as one is looking right now, what are these words? Enlightenment, liberation, spiritual path, spiritual practice. Do they refer to something actual? Or are they ideas? Or memories of something that happened to one years ago or a moment ago, which is now memory? And in wanting to get there, seeking a way to get to one's goal, spiritual, religious goal, what is going on in the mind and throughout the organism? Will one ignore that and remain with the imagination, with a thought and image? And in one's relationship with people right next to one, what is happening? One may dream of love, compassion, wanting that, but not able to work with each other, listen to each other, give each other space, try to understand one's difficulties together. So can one drop labels like psychological or spiritual or religious and find out what is the truth of oneself and each other at this moment of being together? Not the ideas, to see the ideas come up, maybe see that there is almost nothing but ideas. Nothing but memory, knowledge. Or can there be awareness of the softness of the rain? The single drips. And a room full of people, very close. Not knowing who they are and who one is, but open to finding out. Without all the crutches of images, prejudices, categories. unless we become aware of our habits, prejudices, opinions, our whole conditioning, really be in touch with it as it runs habitually and affects us, produces the words that we speak. Unless there is awareness of that, we cannot be free. And there cannot be love and compassion for each other. And to be aware of it is not so difficult. We have to listen as we react to each other, as we get hurt or flattered. Made feel good or depressed, angry or loving. To listen, not to analyze it. Nothing needs to be analyzed, it just needs to be listened to as it happens now, in its fullness, in its depth, without any control or interference. And to be aware of the urge, the habitual urge to control, to interfere, to judge. And in the awareness of it, not to go on with it, just to listen without interference, even though everything wants to interfere, react, resist. Is that possible? All of us want to feel natural, free, spontaneous. Can we pay attention to how tense we are, how self-conscious, and not interfere, not judge it, not want to be done with it, but feel it, see it, bring it to light. Let the rain pour right through it. Somebody, when I was in California, in May, gave me a copy of I don't know even what it is. It doesn't give the name of the book. It didn't give the name of the author. It expresses this yearning to be attentive, to be there, to be natural. And I thought I'd read it, maybe say something afterwards. There are a few things that I've left out. Some of the descriptions were a little bit on the gory side. It's Living Like Weasels, it's called. Living Like Weasels. A weasel is wild. Who knows what he thinks? Somebody told me that this was by Anne Dillard, written by Anne Dillard. He sleeps in his underground den, his tail draped over his nose. Sometimes he lives in his den for 2 days without leaving. Outside he stalks rabbits, mice, muskrats, and birds, killing more bodies than he can eat warm, and often dragging the carcasses home. Obedient to instinct, he bites his prey at the neck, either splitting the jugular vein at the throat or crunching the brain at the base of the skull, and he does not let go. I've been reading about weasels because I saw one last week. I startled a weasel who startled me, and we exchanged a long glance. 20 minutes from my house, through the woods by the quarry and across the highway, is Holland's Pond, a remarkable piece of shallowness, where I like to go at sunset and sit on a tree trunk. Holland's Pond is also called Murray's Pond. It covers 2 acres of bottom land near Tinker Creek with 6 inches of water and 6,000 lily pads. In winter, brown and white steers stand in the middle of it, merely dampening their hooves. From the distant shore they look like miracle itself, complete with miracle's nonchalance. Now in summer the steers are gone. The water lilies have blossomed and spread to a green horizontal plain that is terra firma to plodding blackbirds and tremulous ceiling to black leeches, crayfish, and carp. This is, mind you, suburbia. It is a 5-minute walk in 3 directions to rows of houses, though none is visible here. There is a 55 miles per hour highway at one end of the pond and a nesting pair of wood ducks at the other. Under every bush is a muskrat hole or a beer can. The far end is an alternating series of fields and woods, threaded everywhere with motorcycle tracks, in whose bare clay wild turtles lay eggs. So, I had crossed the highway, stepped over 2 low barbed wire fences, and traced the motorcycle path in all gratitude through the wild rose and poison ivy of the pond's shoreline up into high grassy fields. Then I cut down through the woods to the mossy fallen tree where I sit. This tree is excellent. It makes a dry, upholstered bench at the upper marshy end of the pond, a plush jetty raised from the thorny shore between a shallow blue body of water and a deep blue body of sky. The sun had just set. I was relaxed on the tree trunk, ensconced in the lap of lichen, watching the lily pads at my feet tremble and part dreamily over the thrusting path of a carp. A yellow bird appeared to my right and flew behind me. It caught my eye, I swiveled around, and the next instant, inexplicably, I was looking down at a weasel who was looking up at me. Weasel. I'd never seen one wild before. He was 10 inches long, thin as a curve, a muscled ribbon, brown as fruitwood, soft-furred, alert. His face was fierce, small, and pointed as a lizard's. He would have made a good arrowhead. There was just a dot of chin, maybe 2 brown hairs worth, and then the pure white fur began that spread down his underside. He had 2 black eyes I didn't see any more than you see a window. The weasel was stunned into stillness as he was emerging from beneath an enormous, shaggy wild rose 4 feet away. I was stunned into stillness, twisted backward on the tree trunk. Our eyes locked, and someone threw away the key. Our look was as if 2 lovers or deadly enemies meet unexpectedly on an overgrown path when each had been thinking of something else. A clearing blow to the gut. It was also a bright blow to the brain, or a sudden beating of brains with all the charge and intimate grate of rubbed balloons. It emptied our lungs. It felled the forest, moved the fields, and drained the pond. The world dismantled and tumbled into that black hole of eyes. If you and I looked at each other that way, our skulls would split and drop to our shoulders. But we don't. We keep our skulls. So. He disappeared. This was only last week, and already I don't remember what shattered the enchantment. I think I blinked. I think I retrieved my brain from the weasel's brain and tried to memorize what I was seeing. and the weasel felt the yank of separation, the careening splash down into real life, and the urgent current of instinct. He vanished under the wild rose. I waited motionless, my mind suddenly full of data, and my spirit with pleadings, but he didn't return. Please do not tell me about approach avoidance conflicts. I tell you, I've been in that weasel's brain for 60 seconds, and he was in mine. Brains are private places, muttering through unique and secret tapes. But the weasel and I both plugged into another tape simultaneously for a sweet and shocking time. Can I help it if it was a blank? What goes on in this brain the rest of the time? What does a weasel think about? He won't say. His journal is tracks in clay, a spray of feathers, mouse blood and bone, uncollected, unconnected, loose leaf and blown. I would like to learn or remember how to live. I come to Holland's Pond not so much to learn how to live as, frankly, to forget about it. That is, I don't think I can learn from a wild animal how to live in particular. Shall I suck warm blood, hold my tail high, walk with my footprints precisely over the prints of my hands? But I might learn something of mindlessness, something of the purity of living in the physical senses, and the dignity of living without bias or motive. The weasel lives in necessity, and we live in choice, hating necessity and dying at the last ignobly in its talons. I would like to live as I should, as the weasel lives as he should. And I suspect that for me the way is like the weasel's, open to time and death painlessly, noticing everything, remembering nothing, choosing the given with a fierce and pointed will. I missed my chance. I should have gone for the throat. I should have lunged for that streak of white under the weasel's chin and held on, held through mud and into the wild rose, held on for dear life. For a dearer life, she said. We could live under the wild rose, wild as weasels, mute and uncomprehending. I would very calmly go wild. I could live 2 days in the den, curled, leaning on mouse fur, sniffing bird bones, blinking, licking, breathing musk, my hair tangled in the roots of grasses. Down is a good place to go where the mind is single. Down is out of your ever-loving mind, and back to your careless senses. I think that's a good question, whether the senses can really be careless. meaning not grasping, open, undivided, so that hearing is also seeing. Seeing is not separate from feeling. Feeling not separate from the sound of the bird or the stillness of the sky. With no one in the middle of it all, wanting or escaping. We will end here for today.